Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us today to stay curious with Mr. Clay Walker. Clay, how are you, sir?
Good. Good to be here, Mark.
Well, we're glad to have you. He's a new friend here at the museum, and when we met a couple months ago, he had talked about Vandenberg Air Force Base and the Shuttle launch complex that was going to be used. It was built in the late 1980s, mid 1980s actually, and never was used. So we're going to tell the story about Vandenberg Slick Six.
Slick Six.
And you have some awesome photographs of your personal photo album of the construction of this very impressive, but yet there's a lot of tension about launching.
Very much so.
Very much so. We're going to talk about guards with Uzi machine guns, and no, we don't use Uzis. They had M16s. Yeah, the opposition has Uzis on there, but working with the M16 soldier behind your back and all that sort of good stuff out there. You Californians out there, like Doug Forrest, you're going to enjoy this, and some of you recognize the green screen that was chosen by Marty Winkle here. Marty's on the board. Hi, Marty. You don't have to say hi, Marty.
Hi, Marty. Hey, Mark. Hey, Clay.
Good to see you.
Marty.
We're having a good Monday here. This is our 1000th anniversary week for episodes of Stay Curious, Clay.
That's amazing.
Born out of the pandemic 4 years ago, and we never thought it would come to this. But we're so glad because we came to meet great people like you that are sort of hidden figures behind the 3-decade fabulous space shuttle era that changed our lives.
Yeah, very, very much so. That was a great program, and a lot of good people made it happen.
Well, you're one of them. Tell us where you grew up and how you got involved in engineering.
Well, I grew up in California, and I was always interested in aerospace from a kid. I used to go to the air shows at Lemoore Air Force Base. That was a support base for aircraft carriers, and they would have air shows every year and bring the Blue Angels in, and I would always try to get to the air shows. So when I graduated from high school and was ready to go to college, I went to an engineering school and was studying aerospace engineering based on my love of airplanes, and eventually got out of school, went to work for Ralph M. Parsons, wound up at Vandenberg on a subcontract to Martin Marietta.
Ralph M. Parsons, a big engineering outfit in California.
There were several big engineering companies in Los Angeles at the time that were doing work in the oil fields for Aramco in Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
Parsons, Fluor, Bechtel, most of those guys are all still around.
Yeah, Bechtel's a big one too.
Yeah.
So you got in the space game there for a little bit. You're installation manager and subcontractor for Martin Marietta through M. Parsons, your resume says here, at Vandenberg Air Force Base. I know people might be wondering, what is this green screen behind us here? Explain what the green screen Marty chose there is all about.
When we got most of the work done at Vandenberg, it was time to bring an orbiter in and make sure that everything fit and was going to operate as planned. And the road to Slick 6 parallels the coastline just to the right of the orbiter, past the telephone poles and down a cliff is the Pacific Ocean.
Uh-huh.
And the original road cut wasn't wide enough to allow the orbiter wings to pass on its transporter. The transporter was Italian, built in Italy, and they were team members with NASA at the time. So we had to go through and redo all the road cuts and take down some of the signs, cut them in half and put hinges on them so we could fold them down and then fold them back up after the orbiter passed. And all of that work was done under the watchful eye of a Chumash Indian. The Chumash were native to that part of the Central Coast.
Huh.
And there were burial grounds and campsites. And if we unearthed any of that, we had to stop and let it be evaluated before we could continue on. Luckily, we never ran into anything that prevented us from finishing the work.
Ran into a lot of stoplights and stop signs and stuff like that had to be taken down.
Yep.
Just a little minutia of the shuttle era that, particularly this whole chapter of wanting to launch a rocket from California, Vandenberg. Let's look at the background of that a little bit. There's our advertisement for Clay, who is a facilities engineer at the Space Launch Complex 6, that is affectionately known as Slick 6 to everybody out there at Vandenberg Space Force Base and before. And you're going to see building this shuttle launch pad at Vandenberg. We're going to first show you what it looked like afterwards so you really have a good concept of it. But let Clay just take us through that. But we always want to remind you that as we approach our 1000th show Thursday, we are a proud nonprofit supported by grants and in-kind donations in our auctions. And so you have it in your heart to give a tax-free donation. You can do that directly on our website or by looking at one of the YouTube shows of Stay Curious, and afterwards they put a $ and thanks there on one of the buttons that you can give any amount of money from $5 to $500. So, but Vandenberg Air Force Base, of course, developed in 1966, but no launches occurred until 1995, as it was going to be used for 3 programs: the Titan III rockets in the Manned Orbiting Laboratory. And the Manned Orbiting Laboratory was a spy kind of Gemini spacecraft with a small laboratory attached to it. And they were canceled. So then later they wanted to rebuild it for the space shuttle. Now, why do you want to use Vandenberg for a space shuttle? Tell us why this is an optimum site, Clay.
We have, for the United States, we have 2 ranges that we can launch from. One on the West Coast at Vandenberg and one on the East Coast at Kennedy Space Center. They're there because of the orbital paths that we're achieving when we launch. Vandenberg is used for polar orbits, anything that goes north to south. And they launch from a point on the coastline that's roughly 30 miles west of Santa Barbara, and
let's look at that here.
And an hour north of Santa Barbara. So that allows the vehicles to fly over water almost immediately after launch.
We don't do polar orbits from Florida because of the it doesn't stick out far enough going up the north coast, and down south you got Cuba, but there's California, the state, small map on the left, and then here's where Vandenberg is, the little
detail.
The little part that sticks out furthest west there. So, but yes, it was, and spy satellites particularly.
That was the major function for the Air Force at that site, was polar orbits for spy satellites, which would allow you to basically survey the entire surface of the Earth in 24 hours.
So you could get details of changes of different strategic things around the world. Well, here is what it ended up looking like, and this is the way it looked in January 86.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, January 86, when we'll just cut to the chase. It never happened, partly because of what happened at the end of January 1986, the Challenger accident.
Well, it looks like we're ready to fly, but that orbiter that's stacked on the pad is the Enterprise, which was not space-worthy. It was just there purely to verify that everything was positioned correctly.
The SRBs were dummies, correct?
They were inerts, and the ET, the external tank, was an actual flight tank.
Well, we're showing you the way it looked like, because you're going to see it we're going to deconstruct the salad, so to speak, here for you, and give you a great behind-the-scenes look from Clay's personal photo books from the era in 18. I guess you'd been there in 83 and 82.
I actually got there in 82 and came to KSC in 87. So I was there for 5 years.
Now, is that where they put the payloads in? That was just the covering on the one side, wasn't it?
It is where you also put the payloads in. The Air Force used a different process than KSC. They stacked the boosters and the external tank and the orbiter all on the support launch mount that was going to be flown from. There was no mobile launch platform. There was no crawler to carry it out to the pad.
There it is.
As is done at KSC. This was a construction photo late in the program, and that is the launch mount. It has the same mountings to support the SRBs, hold down posts, just like are used at Kennedy, and also tail service masts that interface with the rear aft end of the orbiter for fuel and oxidizer and electronics.
Marty, my friend, get your pointer ready, because I'd like for you to point out a few things as Clay's talking about them there that I think you'll catch on to. So, yeah, that just kind of looks very interesting compared to looking at 39A or B there.
Yeah.
I also wanted to point out, you see the gantry going across to the orbiter door there. We're going to hatch. We're going to see a lot of pictures from up there. Thank you, Marty.
There we go.
And Marty, you're familiar with walking around 39A and B. I don't think you said you were ever out at Slick 6, but you can point out things that you see also in there. There's that shot, very iconic image of the shuttle era. What a, if it landed at Edwards Air Force Base, they would have to bring it back on the road, right?
Yes.
Somehow.
Yes. Well, actually, Edwards had a mate-demate facility. Okay. So they could tow it over to that and put it on the 747 to fly it back. This is a shot leaving the north part of the base from the airfield. They flew Enterprise in on the 747 and took it off and mounted it on the transporter and drove it south to Slick 6.
Oh, the photographers there and VIPs and fans like that. Again, we'll never ever see these type of images again. And what a day that must have been in California history.
Quite a day, and a lot of people didn't get to see it because it occurred on the base. And the base, of course, had pretty tight security in those days. I think we had about 430 security personnel.
Wow. Yeah, a lot of people comment about the NASA people are used to being some security elements here, but once they got there, we were just talking to Dan McCune, worked in the VAB. He said, yeah, it was up several notches because this is a serious facility for the protection of our country.
Yeah, exactly. This picture also shows the transporter, which later made its way to Kennedy Space Center when they determined they weren't going to fly shuttles from Vandenberg. Some of the facilities and some of the equipment were transferred back to KSC.
Now this is Discovery? No.
That's Enterprise.
That was Enterprise. Enterprise, it was used in the approach and landing tests.
Right.
There is the whole facility again, and we're going to deconstruct it for you. But basically, explain to us the clamshell that is created with this. The USAF on the side of the building, that moved.
That was what they called the Shuttle Assembly Building, and that was its parked position. It had leaf doors on the west end, which in this picture are open, and it could move up to the launch mount where you see the orbiter and the ET and the boosters. And then immediately to the right was what they called the mobile service tower. And it also moved. It moved to the west. And between the mobile service tower and the shuttle assembly building, they enclosed the orbiter and the structure and protected it from the weather and allowed it to be a much more habitable place for the workers that were preparing everything. Vandenberg often gets fog and very cold being next to the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, weather's a big factor there. So where's the launch control? On the other side of the mountains?
It's actually behind the buildings on the left there.
So it's it's in that cluster of buildings on the left.
Yep, it's behind those, and what you're seeing there are actually two buildings. One that had payload preparation cells.
Mm-hmm.
They had 3 cells. That's the lower concrete building to the left side, and at the right end of that, you can see some red painted structure.
Mm-hmm.
That was at the 75-ton hoist, similar to what we have here at KSC, that would lift the payloads out of that building up to the height that it would need to be loaded into the orbiter payload bay.
Mm.
They would transfer it into the gray structure just immediately to the right. That was the equivalent of the payload changeout room that we have at Kennedy. And that building would transit down the entire launch pad, and it had a set of inflatable seals on the east side that would interface with the back of the payload bay.
Mm-hmm. But this is the configuration for launch.
Well, yes, it is.
So you imagine those nasty SRBs with all that cloud and flame and stuff. Marty, would you point out the 3 exhaust ports there? And Clay can talk about how the backside SRB has to do. No, it's the SSMEs that have to do a right turn.
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead, Clay. Talk about that.
Marty, you can see the exit work
Right there.
That's for the SSMEs, and the small one is for the south exit for the south solid rocket booster, and you can see just the opening for the north one on the other side of the stack there. Just see the concrete down at the bottom.
That's good job.
That was for the north SRB to exhaust from. So the shuttle engines fired down into the pad and went through a tunnel underneath the pad surface and circled around to that larger opening there and exhausted to the south.
There's kind of a big schematic there that Wikipedia had to label some of the buildings there.
Yep.
And here we have labeled them again there. Very condensed situation there besides the sprawling Florida complexes there. And with that launch control center just a quarter mile away, there was some nervous
early
people,
concerns about having people in the launch control at the time of launch, since it was only a quarter mile from the actual
Look
vehicle.
at a few more. Now this was out in November 84 to May 85. This is Enterprise out there for a bunch of pretty picture taking, and of course the mate demate. It has its own aura about it in there. Just look at that though. How
Picture you can also see the liquid oxygen tank, which is in the foreground, and the sphere in the background is the liquid hydrogen tank.
Okay.
We separated fuels and oxidizers basically the same way that they do here at KSC, opposite sides of the vehicle. And all of that had to be run with cryogenic pipe up to the launch mount and through the tail service masts.
All right, good. And we're moving along here, Marty. I know you'll center that picture between us here in a second. There's how it looks on the pad there, like you say. You got the white beanie
right
on the top that topped off the ET, and the we're going to see all this there. Now we're going to start seeing it in a different new light there. Now we're under the construction when you were working out there.
Yes.
And that's one of the big exhaust ports there above your head.
You can see one building there that's got a crane next to it. They were finishing that building up, and the shuttle assembly building they hadn't even begun construction on yet. That's the mobile service tower. It was about 100 feet taller than this picture here for the manned orbiting laboratory. So for shuttle, we took 100 feet off and built the last 60 feet back up with an overhang. And you can see the 275 ton or 250 ton crane that we put in the mobile service tower that would be used to stack the booster segments and lift the nose of the ET and the orbiter so that they could be stacked on the launch mount.
So some of this was repurposed from the MOLE program of the 1960s.
Yes, the pad was originally going to.
Marty, would you mind moving that picture between the two of us there?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Pad was originally going to be used for the MOLE program, and the shuttle was coming along, and they decided that they would cancel the effort here at Vandenberg for the MOLE program because the orbiter was just around the corner, and they were going to plan on flying everything in the orbiter.
And there's a look west. A storm coming in. I've noticed some of your pictures, very few of them.
That's looking west.
Looks like you had a rain episode almost every day, maybe.
Well, fog every day for sure. Often the fog would be there in the morning and it would go away in midday, and then by the afternoon it would roll back in. So it was often pretty cool and pretty cold out there. This is looking into the payload changeout room. And the opening at the top is where they would pass the payloads through to another building that wasn't built yet.
It's right in between us here, and that one yet to be built.
Yeah, and this is construction of that other building. They built it on what they called the hard mounts, which were steel shoes concreted into the launch pad where they could build the building structure and not have to worry about supports. And then at the end, when they put the hydraulics in the building, this is the hydraulic trucks that actually would move the structure up to the launch mount to install the payload in the orbiter.
It's so interesting. We're talking with Clay Walker, who worked, I hate to say it, but like 40 years ago.
It was a long time ago.
Out there at on our shuttle program there. And Marty, we got a question there.
Well, we have two comments and one question. And the comments go from discussion late, several minutes ago. But it comes from Star Lord. AUX, AUX, and SCE to AUX is not an acronym. It stands for auxiliary and is pronounced AUX.
Correct.
Okay, yeah. Okay, then we have another comment from, if I can find it, from Carlton.
They may have confused that with what I said about the liquid oxygen tank. And LOX is the abbreviation for that, or the acronym for that.
Okay, we got a comment from Carlton. He said, back in the late 80s, before the pad was mothballed, there was talk of the exhaust flame trench having a 90-degree turn and possible gases accumulating in the turn and exploding on launch. Was this true?
Yes.
Yeah, we heard that at KSC.
It was true. The manned orbiting laboratory flame duct exhaust, only the exhaust portion of it was used. We moved where the vehicle was going to be stacked to the east so that we had all the shuttle main engines exhausting into a tunnel that ran under the pad and circled around to the exhaust port for the manned orbiting laboratory, and we had a system inside the tunnel to eliminate the explosive problem with trapped hydrogen. We had a steam inerting system that was installed in the ceiling of the tunnel structure to do that.
Excellent. Thank you for your questions and keeping us straight. Marty, another comment or question?
We had a question from Dave Stange. How much of this was repurposed for other launches that now go on at Vandenberg?
Quite a bit of it was repurposed. The launch pad itself was used, and they, what did we say they launched?
Delta 4.
Delta 4s.
Yeah. And now SpaceX is using it.
Right. And the
Falcon
the
9.
Deltas used, or one of their systems out there, used solid rocket boosters, and there's a building just west of Slick 6 at the bottom of the pad that had a facility that they could handle all of the booster segments for the solids. So that was all reused. We had the equivalent of an orbiter processing facility on North Base next to the runway that was there for when shuttles would return to Vandenberg. When we outfitted OMRF 3 at Vandenberg, or at Kennedy, we went to Vandenberg and took all of their orbiter processing facility equipment, platforms, and everything they had at Vandenberg, and barged it back to KSC and installed it in OPF 5A3.
Great. All right. Well, they do repurpose some things. Even this crawler there, orange crawler you see in our green screen is out there at Kennedy.
That transporter was repurposed for shuttle at Kennedy, and when we retired the shuttles, SpaceX uses it to transport boosters.
Oh, do they?
Yes.
That's what they travel. Wow, that's interesting.
So that's gotten a lot of use.
The picture that
for a 40-year-old piece of equipment.
Ferried out the booster for the crewed launch. It's going to happen at 12:05 Thursday, or Friday morning. I mean, that's interesting. Marty, another comment?
Question from Gary Jarrell. In the event of an emergency after launch, where would the abort landing sites be?
Yeah. Good question, Gary.
We never got that far. I'm sure somebody probably knows where those would have been. I do not.
Pacific Ocean. However, they did have an escape system planned, and you're going to see that here in just a minute, Gary. Yeah, Marty, another comment.
We've got a couple of questions. Amy Collins, as I understand it, the safety of the wound structure, SRBs, are the main reason they canceled Vandenberg Air Force Base. That and DOD was returning to expendable rockets whenever possible.
Well, the fact that we had Challenger pretty much killed the shuttle program at Vandenberg. And I don't know how much the booster situation had to do with that.
There was a crew selected that was going to launch on October 1986 with Bob Crippen as the commander. It was a DOD mission. In fact, the Air Force was going to buy the orbiter Discovery. They'd already paid for it, basically, in building it. And again, just like the Manned Orbiting Laboratory program, the acceleration of transistor circuitry and so forth allowed satellites to do better than humans could with film and so forth from space. So again, the advent of the spy versus spy satellite becoming so improved that it was kind of a moot point there. And there was a lot of people that had a lot of worries about tiles staying on. When you see more of these pictures, you're going to see how close the mountains are. And launch control a quarter of a mile away. Geez, they weren't going to survive a pad explosion or anything like that. So there was a lot of I don't know what was the impetus to keep it going, but there was a lot of people that were happy that though we spent $4 billion developing this, it was never used.
Well, they had made the decision to phase out the regular launch vehicles that they did use, the expendables, and they were converting all their payloads over to fly in the orbiter. And after Challenger, they decided they weren't going to be using the shuttle.
Excellent.
And when that happened, they started cranking up the lines for the expendables again, so that they could still fly.
And those aren't my opinions, Clay. Those are from our godfather, Charlie Mars, who was the project manager out there, and other people who I've talked to at the Space Museum, because I literally knew nothing about Vandenberg 7 years ago, and talking to you and other people there. What an interesting chapter, again, in American space history that never came to fruition.
Right.
Yes, Marty, question.
Question from Doug Forrest. How was the problem of the intense sound created at launch going to be handled with the launch ops building being so close? I'm guessing there was a water suppression system, but a quarter mile is still very close.
Yes, we had been watching the launches at KSC while we were constructing Slick 6, and the first launch out there had no sound suppression water system, and we got some very high readings that we possibly could have damaged the orbiter from just the intensity of the sound. And so KSC immediately went to work and put in a sound suppression water system. We had the advantage of seeing all of that, and we built that into our launch mount as well, because we knew we were going to have the same potential there. So the I don't know if any of our pictures show it, but there's a water tank that's basically an exact replica of the ones that we have at KSC at pads 39A and B. It's just got shorter legs because we built it up on the side of the mountain, so we didn't have to have quite as tall a structure to get the elevation needed.
And using gravity as the force flow down there.
Yes, exactly.
Marty, you had another question there.
Question from Clyde Lewis. Do the mountains in the area help to deaden some of the launch sounds or shock waves from the surrounding areas?
It would have. Slick 6 was quite a distance from any area that normally people would have been in, and any of those that were close enough, the Air Force would have cleared those areas before they tried to launch.
Well, let's look at Clay's photo album here of his time out there. Oh wait, let me go back to that one. That was a cool picture there.
So this was looking through one of the moving buildings that were on the pad surface and looking toward the launch mount, which is obscured by the building that you see there.
Okay.
And this was our launch mount on the left on the bottom, and our crew access arm with the white room extended south. The
red structure there coming off.
The hydrogen vent line was on the right-hand side in the three-tiered gray steel arm that could swing around to mate with the ET. And I don't think we had the beanie cap installed yet on that photo.
Now, this is my favorite picture of all of them you showed me here. There's a lot of info here. Marty, get your arrow ready.
Yeah. In the foreground, we're on the fixed service structure, and we're looking down at the slide wire escape baskets.
Yeah, there's escape baskets there, those poles in front of you there. And never even thought about that.
The concrete building just a little bit further on beyond the baskets was for HVAC systems for purging, and the slide wires ran over that building, and the next immediate structure there that you're pointing at, and the landing zone wasn't constructed yet.
For the slide wire.
For the slide wires.
Huh.
Yeah.
Looks like a Three Stooges thing where they're going to go right into that building in there. What do you have off to the right there? That's one of the vents.
That was preparations for a gas storage area. They had a little small one there, and they were enlarging it. We had to bring in storage tanks for helium and nitrogen for the pad.
Pacific Ocean's up at the top of the screen.
At the very top. And this is down on the tower at the slide wire basket level, and you can see the ocean in the background. We still didn't have the slide wires in place yet, but in the middle of the picture on the horizon is V31, which was a facility that would be used for preparing the solid rocket booster segments that would later be driven up onto the pad.
We're going to see pictures of that.
This is looking off the opposite side of the fixed service structure. This is the back end of the rolling beam that had the white room on it, and we're looking down on the liquid hydrogen sphere. This is looking the other way, and the rolling beam and the white room are in this photo, and the exhaust duct for the SSMEs and the South SRB can be seen on either side of the arm. And if you look closely down in the lower left corner, you can see a couple of hold-down posts.
See those, Marty, the red circles in the dark area on the bottom left?
Those same posts that we use at KSC.
That's the SRB sit on that.
They're installed on the mobile launch platform for Kennedy, and here they were installed directly onto the launch mount.
80 tons, right?
Yeah.
About 80, each section's about 20 tons, I think, of the SRB.
Yeah.
And they're just these little pegs there they're hanging off of, right?
Well, if you were close enough, they're massive.
Yeah.
Yeah, heavy-duty steel work there.
And like Carlton said, the SSME engines had to do a right turn. Also, there was some jet engines that were needed to push the exhaust out.
Late in the program, they were worried about ice forming on the external tank, especially between the external tank and the bottom of the orbiter. So they actually installed a facility that had jet engines in it, and the exhaust was ducted up between the external tank and the orbiter. So if they had a problem with icing, they could eliminate that with the jet engine exhaust.
Marty, we have another stay curious question.
Here we got a comment from Robert Law. And I'm not sure if he's talking about the emergency landing sites, but he's saying, if I pronounce it correctly, Macrahish in Argyll, Scotland, had the longest runway in the UK and was also used by the US Air Force. So again, I'm not sure if he's just stating that or he's indicating that that's one of the emergency landing sites. So Robert, you may want to elaborate.
Yeah, good to hear you, Robert, up there. He's from Dundee, Scotland. Yes, that was an abort landing site, but launching this, again, you're talking about what abort landing sites would you have going south?
For polar orbit.
And of course, that's the TAL, Transoceanic Abort Landing Sites, TAL program, where they would be in Gambia and Morocco and Spain.
Well, TAL is transatlantic.
Yeah. So this would be trans-Pacific.
And we would have had to have them maybe South America, possibly.
Right, yeah. Or there have to be some Mexican.
Because we as soon as we left the pad, we'd be over the Pacific Ocean.
Right.
And
it was a freewheeling shuttle launch. That's for doggone sure, without a lot of safety nets, I think, that Kennedy affords. Marty, comment or question again?
Well, it's just Robert Law was saying that it was an emergency landing site from Vandenberg. This is based in Scotland.
That there was.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right.
Did they know where that was?
That'd probably be on the first orbit, coming back into first orbit. Yeah. in there. Where'd he say they built that long runway?
It was in Argyle.
Okay.
Argyle.
But the base.
All right. Well, we're enjoying this little conversation with Clay Walker, a new friend of our museum. We need to add up how many interviews we've actually done, Marty, in 1,000 episodes. We're pushing a couple hundred people we've talked to, and have to kind of do some ciphering on that next few days.
Mark, I just checked this Friday. Remember, from June through last week, I think we were up to I think it was 72 or 73 was the number of interviews, and that was just in 8 months or 7 months.
Huh. And that's what we're all about, Clay, is talking to people like you about things that you did and bringing back some of those old memories of being young and then the good times you had in California when the shift was over there. And you're very articulate and you're doing a great job. And I'm enjoying it and hope everybody else is out there. Let's look at a few more of his home pictures here. Did you want to talk about that one? That is another heck of a picture showing you some of the trenches there. There's the arm going out to the White Room.
This shows the inert boosters that we used with an actual flight tank and the Enterprise to verify interfaces with all the facility connections. And you can see the White Room is out there over the door to the crew cabin. This is looking down the arm, and in the background is just the outline of the White Room. The doors are closed, and there's a person standing
you can see
down there close to the White Room.
There's another
shot of it.
And Enterprise is now on the Hudson River, on the Intrepid,
on the Intrepid aircraft carrier.
It has been all over the place. There is the White Room.
That's inside the White Room.
Look at how much they had finished and some of the things that they were working on. Now, I kind of threw these in just to show workers working. And it's a dirty job. There's a lot of concrete being poured all the time.
Yeah, the crews that were doing all this work were out there for years, of course. And just to the right is the bottom of the liquid hydrogen tank, and they were preparing foundations for the vacuum jacketed piping that would run up to the launch mount to be able to fuel the orbiter.
So this is all
liquid
for
hydrogen. Yep.
And
all pipe supports.
And don't know the scale there until you see a person.
Yep,
there,
there you
gentleman
go.
up there standing on top of some freshly rained on concrete pad there.
That's another view of the work going on for the pipe supports.
Now, what's the soil like in California? Is it like a Florida soil sand, or is it a different texture?
Yeah, it's different. It's a little more volcanic than Florida is, and the mountains come right down to the ocean, and there at the pad we had a bluff probably a couple hundred feet from the edge of the bluff down to the water. There was even a ship that had wrecked there during the war, and occasionally on low tide you could see the boiler. It was sticking up out of the water.
Huh.
The rest of the ship, I think, had probably was underneath, and you couldn't see it or rusted away. It was broken up. They were moving quickly up the coastline in the dark, and Vandenberg sticks out about 30 miles west from Santa Barbara, so they happened to run into the rocks there, and luckily the ships that were following were notified that the lead ship was coming up on the rocks, and they pulled out a line and went further west to get to avoid.
How long ago was that? What kind of ships we talking about?
Oh, that was World War II.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think they court-martialed the captains on the ships that didn't crash because they were in a convoy running full speed up the coastline, and that was their orders, and they saved the ships.
Oh gosh.
So it was just funny that they went after those guys for doing
Well, of
the right
course,
thing.
launching rockets here in Florida, and you have to build things to sustain hurricanes.
Yep.
Well, there's a big thing that happens in California frequently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Earthquakes. So how was the Slick 6 earthquake designed?
Well, they were using the earthquake standards, but the facilities themselves are extremely robust when you're having to launch basically a 6 million pound vehicle. Everything is pretty robust in construction, and of course that earthquake zones were all taken into account. We had maps that showed the fault lines in the area, so everybody was well aware of that, and that all was integrated into the design to make sure that those buildings were safe.
Huh. Interesting. I hope you all are enjoying this. Here's just a everyday pipe, but has to be put in the right place. And
well, this was a retaining wall, and it was up on the slope behind the pad, and behind the wall was the hydrogen tank, and the wall was to hopefully protect the tank if they had a pad explosion from. They put the wall in to protect it from shrapnel.
Huh.
This was the launch mount. Pretty early on, we hadn't painted anything yet, and we had just received the tail service masts, which are the same as the ones we use at KSC, and had some machinists lay out their positions on the top of the launch mount and get them mounted and grouted in so that they'd be in the correct position to interface with the orbiter.
There's some more of the everyday construction stuff.
We did a lot of concrete work. We did some special concrete for the exits for the flame trenches. We vacuum treated the concrete to increase the hardness of it so that it could withstand the erosive nature of the exhaust from the SRBs.
Uh-huh. Here again, and that's what it all ended up looking like again. Some of the labels on there. Those are most of the pictures from your photo album. There's a nice one you
If
took.
you go back to that one,
Uh-huh.
up on the hill there, you can see the water tank, 400,000 gallon water tank for the sound suppression system, and the line came off the bottom of the tank and went underground, went underneath the mobile service tower, the MST, which is that first structure you see in its parked position away from the launch mount.
Uh-huh.
And there was a system of valves built into the launch pad to control the flow. We had a configuration that had 5 48-inch butterfly valves.
Man.
And
4 foot.
to take all the water that came down from the tank.
Did they ever test it?
They did test it. The first test, one of the butterfly valve flaps closed during the test and forced or increased the pressure in the entire system. And we had 2 8-inch bypasses to the 5 48-inch valves, and the increased pressure, we had some pressure regulating valves in the bypass lines. They were 8-inch, and the increased pressure blew the regulator portions right out of the valve bodies.
Oh my gosh.
And the valves were down in a pit below the pad level. That immediately filled up with water. So we had some troubleshooting to do and some cleanup to do to put it all back together. But they did test it again, and they were successful.
Okay. There's the bird on the pad there.
Yep, with the mountains in the background on a nice sunny day. They had an official photo day that was kind of foggy and really hard to see anything. And this was taken before then during the construction phase on a day when the fog was gone and and it wasn't too cold outside, and had nice
Close up of the
Nice
SRBs stacked up there.
SRBs and ET and orbiter, not there yet.
And again, from that top of the
Yep, that's
service
that's
tower.
from the service tower looking west out over the ocean again.
The rainbow in that cloud there, just barely in your photograph there.
Just barely see it.
Look at how the again an early version of the stand that the shuttle is going to be launched from.
The building on the left side, you can see the cutout where the payloads would pass through that building and be loaded into the back of the orbiter, and you can sort of see the configuration matches. There were a set of inflatable seals there installed on that building, so
they didn't dig any deeper, Clay, did they, underneath there?
There's a lot underground.
Okay.
Yeah,
because you're used to seeing that at Kennedy Space Center on the porch there. A lot of
for the launch mount, everything comes in from the support buildings, the HVAC, and some of the air conditioning comes from the south part of the pad where the payloads are prepared. So all of the ventilation and cooling and everything that they needed for the payloads all ran underground and up into the launch mount.
Here's another look at what could have been there.
Yep. Looking down the pad from the west. The building that we're looking through is the shuttle assembly building that was built late in the program. And it wasn't totally completed yet, but it had leaf doors in it, similar to the ones in the VAB, so you could, once it was joined with the mobile service tower, which is in the background, it completely surrounded the vehicle launch mount and protected everything from the weather and made it a much nicer environment for crews to work in. And that's just
There's
another view
tower.
of the pad. Shows the water tower, hydrogen tank in the background, just above the exhaust for the South SRB, and just the corner of the SSME exhaust, which went down under the pad through that tunnel and made a right turn and came up under the launch mount. And the orbiter engines fired down into the throat of that tunnel.
Yeah, that's so cool there. So you had to get the birds out there. This is the demate device there. You had some really neat photos of.
This is the one at KSC, and this is
this is the one here.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the one here.
All right. So that's what we're seeing. I got the photos mixed up there, but interesting photo all the same.
This was at Vandenberg.
All right.
And this was an apron just off the flight line to the north. We had to increase the length of the runway there to allow the orbiter to land. And the building in the background was a detachment of rescue helicopters, and Vandenberg was their base. And this was the 747 pulling into the Vandenberg mate-demate structure, and this is testing the mate-demate to be sure they could interface with the orbiter and lift it off the 747. Another shot of it.
That's Enterprise.
Enterprise.
We don't care if it falls. It's not going to go to orbit.
Well, you know.
That looks pretty ominous, though, just hanging there.
New York might have been upset because it's in the museum there now.
And you mentioned the facility. This is inside. This stuff was built at Vandenberg, ready to roll.
This was the facility where they processed all the solid rocket booster segments. They called it V31, and it was just off the Pacific Ocean. And when the boosters were stacked and checked out, they'd break them down and they'd put them on transporters and drive them up onto the little pad surface to stack them on the launch mount. And we were getting ready to go. We were getting ready to fly. These are not inert, they're live.
Oh.
This is one of the segments on the transporter coming up from the support building in the background. They're driving up the road that we had that led up onto the pad surface. And we had some K-mags that would come underneath the stands that the segments were mounted on, and the K-mags would lift the stands and drive them up onto the pad.
Mm-hmm. Of course, the ET.
This was one of the external tanks. We had a building to the south of the pad where we could service the tanks and store 3 spare tanks. And we used these trucks to pull the ET trailers up onto the pad surface.
Here's a couple rare pictures, folks. Actually, the mating at Vandenberg.
This is inside 2 of the structures that are mobile. The one is called the Mobile Service Tower, MST, and that's behind the boosters that you see. And the platforming in there allows you access to the boosters and the ET. And the other structure is more to the right-hand side, and it also had a crane. And between those 2 buildings, we could pick up the nose and tail of the external tank and rotate it to vertical and move it over between the boosters and attach it to the boosters. The orbiter would have been handled the same way. It would have come in horizontally on the transporter, and the 2 crane system would have rotated it to the vertical and moved it over to the ET and connected it to the stack.
Right in place where it's going to launch.
Right in place where it would actually launch from.
Then this building moves away.
And both of those buildings move back out of the way. The flame trench for the SSMEs had a wall that on the west side of the launch mount that we actually had to lower down flat so that we could drive the ET in and get it close enough to the crane in the eastmost building for it to grapple the nose and be able to pick up and rotate it. And before launch, the west wall of the launch mount would be raised back into position.
Interesting. Interesting to me, and hope you all been fascinated by Clay Walker going back in time. And Clay, you're talking like it's just all still there. I really appreciate.
Seems like only yesterday.
Yeah. Here's a Falcon 9 lifting off in the fog that we talked about there at Slick 6. And that's a Delta 4.
Delta 4.
From out there. They've also launched a Falcon Heavy. I know at least one Falcon Heavy's done a military payload. And that's a shuttle at the top and a Delta 4 at the bottom there. Over that same facility that apparently works just fine now for other. Have you ever visited it in the last decade or so?
Yeah, we've been out there a few times.
Yeah. And what comes back to you when you're out there?
Well, it was just a nice place to be for about 5 years. The area's full of vineyards now. They do a lot of wines. Tasting up there, and they've got some great restaurants. They've got a little village that's east of Vandenberg in Solvang that's sort of like Dutch architecture, and it's a sort of a tourist attraction there. People come from all over the world to go to Solvang. One of the original wineries in the area was researched and built by the Firestone family. They eventually sold it to one of their friendly competitors. And after they did the research on the climate and the soils and found that it was good for wine grapes, the whole area exploded. And now there's just a lot of wineries there. And they have a little area outside Lompoc that they call the wine ghetto. and all the local wineries have booths and things in there for wine tasting. So it's a very nice area, and there's a lot of people that moved up there from Santa Barbara to retire, and a lot of coastal villages on up the coast all the way to San Francisco. Just delightful.
Pretty area of the country for sure. Well, Clay, we really enjoy you sharing this with us today. Neil 1030, thank you for chiming in. And we've got some new viewers, Marty, that you wrote down. Well, Catherine Walker, you might know her.
Yep, I think I know her.
Okay.
It's my youngest daughter.
All right. Well, glad to see you out there, young lady. Cody Ruthko is watching. Cynthia Rossi, Star Lord. You know Star?
No, I just remembered he was one of our questioners early on.
Yeah. Amy Collins, a lot of new people catch and stay curious now. Tom Celentano, we know of Robert Law up in Dundee, Scotland. Carlton Bailey over about 30 miles from here. Not even that. He's about 15 miles from where our studio is. Doug Forrest is there in Los Angeles. Mark Usiak, that you're watching. Mark in Pennsylvania. His brother Tommy will probably be watching later. Bill Whiting is a faithful viewer of our show. Clyde Lewis, thank you for watching. Cliff Watson's in Pomona, Australia. Dave Stangy's up in Michigan. Steve Jokums is on the shores of Lake Michigan. And Gary Gerald, how them Vidalia onion crops coming, buddy? He's a Vidalia onion farmer in Collins, Georgia.
Oh, that's great.
And we're hoping for a good crop so he can bring us a big box of them.
Absolutely.
You like them?
Oh, yeah, they're wonderful.
Yeah, well, Gary's been with us. A lot of you have been with us for a long time, and we certainly appreciate that, as this is our 1,000th episode week that Marty and I are celebrating. Clay, what an awesome show. Let's show off some of your photography here.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, this is a photo that was done by the Lockheed corporate photographer.
Oh, okay.
And it's when Endeavor was being delivered to KSC. This is a stop it made at Vandenberg. And the corporate guys at the time, they were in charge of flying the shuttle.
You've got another one over there.
And they assigned their photographer to follow the orbiter from California all the way out to Vandenberg and then on to KSC, and they had some great shots of it.
Yeah.
They took with a special camera, and you've got one on your wall here of the Endeavor at Pad A.
Yes, we do.
Which was also taken with the same format camera and the same corporate photographer.
Yeah. Special 3 lens deal. It's
panorama view, and the guy did great work. And we ordered a few of those. He told us how to order them. And in those days, they had the archive in one of the photo shops in Burbank, where Lockheed was headquartered at the time.
Okay.
And they had their entire photo archive there. And he said, yep, call these guys. They'll need an order of at least 30. And you can call them up, give them my name, and tell them which picture you want, and they'll print them up and send them to you. So we ordered the shot that you have on the wall there, I think 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing those, for sure. Yeah. And hand me that. We're going to have you sign our.
Sure.
There
we go.
We have a guest. Always have a photograph for the last 3 years, where our guests have signed it. So we're going to get you to put your signature on the press site out there that we have there. Clay, thank you for a wonderful program. You certainly
I enjoyed it.
Painted a picture that I think few people have envisioned about out there at Vandenberg, and how our shuttle was so thought about to be launched from there, and circumstances, maybe it was a good thing that it wasn't. What do you think about the whole thing?
Most of us that were there that came here to Florida came after the Challenger. That was the impetus. They had laid a lot of the workforce off after Challenger, and when they were getting ready to get back in the air and fly again, they needed to do some analysis on the top 100 systems before they launched to make sure everything was good and that nothing had been missed. And they needed people that were familiar and had clearances. And we were still working on the site at Vandenberg, so they came out and hired quite a few of us, and we came out and helped ramp up and get flying again. So that was our story for how we got there. Otherwise we might have still been at Vandenberg doing something else, since the shuttle never flew from there.
Well, you were part of this wonderful 3-decade era that changed our world, the way we're living in the 21st century, and appreciate you sharing that with us, Clay Walker. We've got a great week planned for you. Tomorrow we're going to catch up on some space news and events going on, like the moon lander at the South Pole and other things going on. Wednesday, we've got Jonathan Ward, who's written 4 books. The last one about astronaut Eileen Collins. That's going to be made into a documentary. We're excited for Jonathan. He also wrote with Mike Leinbach the definitive book on Columbia called Bringing Columbia Home. And you're going to enjoy a conversation with a great friend of our museum and mine, Jonathan Ward, on Wednesday. Thursday, Marty and I are going to sit out there on our thrones and let people come and tell us how much they like Stay Curious over the last 4 years. Not really. We're just going to invite people that have took us to this level, Clay, and please stop by if you want, get a piece of cake and enjoy the festivities. And Friday, I'm going to record a show so I can take off on Friday and probably talk about some of the guests and stuff we've had on Stay Curious. I've really not looked at the whole body of work we've done, but it kind of, it's there. So we'll kind of put it all in context for everybody out there. So
congratulations on the first 1,000.
Yeah, thank you very much. I figure in a couple more thousand will be an overnight sensation. Christopher Mick, he was there at the very beginning. Thank you. From Hudson, Wisconsin. He's a solar system ambassador, and so many of you have seen 900 of these shows. I guarantee it. And so we appreciate everything that you do to support us and put up with us, including Marty putting up with me all this time. So until tomorrow, when we're going to look at some space history and check out a shuttle of February or 2, I'm Mark Marquette saying we can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us. Thanks a lot, Clay.
Thank you.